The train, a normal train on a normal day. People sat, they read papers or stared at their phones. Nothing special, just another journey. The wheels turned, a steady, monotonous rhythm. Comforting, almost, or so you would think. This particular journey was precisely like any other, right up until the moment it wasn't. The world outside was a canvas of grey, drab, unknowing, utterly unprepared for the show. Inside, the carriage air was stale, recycled. It carried the faint, lingering scent of lukewarm coffee and unacknowledged regret. A baby cried somewhere in the distance, a thin, reedy sound. A man coughed, a dry, hacking noise. Businessmen, faces grim, typed furiously. On tiny, brightly glowing screens, each of them was oblivious, each locked securely in their own little world, their own little personal dramas. The mundane ballet of daily commuting played out, life ticking by, unremarkable, utterly terrifyingly normal, for now at least. Sunlight, weak and watery, attempted to filter through the grimy windows. It cast long, dull shadows across the garishly patterned seats, across tired, uninterested faces. No one looked up much. Why would they bother? It was just the 10:15 service to somewhere entirely forgettable, another designated stop on the line, another tedious day closer to the weekend, or perhaps further from the last one, depending entirely on your personal disposition. This was the fragile illusion of control, of predictability. The landscape scrolling past outside was a predictable blur. Green fields, occasionally punctuated by listless cows. Grey, unremarkable towns, endless skeletal pylons, marching relentlessly across the countryside, like an invading army constructed of cold, indifferent metal. No one paid them much attention. They were just part of the scenery, part of the constant background noise of a life lived largely on rails, heading inexorably towards an unseen, unconsidered destination. A destination that was about to change, radically, irrevocably, and very, very soon. Then a sudden lurch. Not the usual expected kind, not the gentle, familiar sway of the train changing points. This was starkly different, a violent shudder. A deep metallic groan emanating from the train's very gut. Heads lifted abruptly. Phones were lowered with a frown. A few nervous, uncertain glances were exchanged between strangers. What was that? Just a minor blip, surely. The train was still moving forward, but noticeably slower now. Much, much slower. Something felt distinctly off, terribly, deeply off. The rhythmic clickety-clack, the train's mechanical heartbeat faltered. It became uneven, strained like the sound of a dying pulse. The carriage lights flickered once, then twice, then thankfully stayed on, but they seemed dimmer now. Subdued, a collective anxious intake of breath. You could feel it in the air. The atmosphere thickened palpably, with unspoken questions, with a new, entirely unwelcome tension. The baby further down the carriage started crying again, louder this time, its cries sharper, more insistent, as if it somehow knew. Outside, the sky began to transform, not in any normal meteorological way, not a predictable weather change. The flat grey seemed to pulse with an inner light. A faint, unnatural hum started to fill the air. You could almost taste it on your tongue, metallic, electric. The train crawled along the tracks. Then, with a final protracted sigh of brakes, it stopped, dead. Between stations, in the absolute middle of nowhere. Silence descended, heavy, expectant, utterly profoundly chilling. This was not good. Whispers erupted almost immediately. What's happened then? Driver know anything? Signal failure, you reckon? The usual mundane guesses, the usual desperate attempts to rationalize the situation, to bring it all back to the realm of the normal. But the strange hum grew louder. The light outside shifted again, becoming sickly, a strange, pale, luminous green. Then a faint, impossible shade of violet appeared at the distant horizon. This wasn't a simple signal failure. This was something else entirely, something unknown, something very, very bad. And then it came. Not a sound at first, just light. An impossible, searing light, blinding. It washed over everything in an instant, erasing the world for a single suspended heartbeat. Then the colours. Oh, the colours. Every single colour you've ever seen, and several you definitely haven't, exploding outwards from a single defined point on the horizon. A silent, psychedelic, horrifying blue. Beautiful. Utterly, terrifyingly beautiful. This was not natural. This was the end of natural. This was something new. A mushroom cloud. But not like the grainy, black and white pictures from history books. Not just grey and full of grim fury. This one climbed with an unholy grace. It billowed outwards. It pulsed with a vibrant inner light. Swirls of deep sapphire, ribbons of brilliant emerald, streaks of incandescent burning ruby. A poisonous, vibrant, impossible flower, unfurling majestically in the sky, reaching towards the heavens. A terrible masterpiece of utter destruction, painted across the sky by a mad, vengeful god. It was an artist's worst nightmare made real. The cloud grew, higher and wider still, dominating the entire sky. It was a living, breathing thing, a kaleidoscope of ultimate doom. Deep, regal violets bled seamlessly into shocking, vivid pinks. Oranges so bright they burned, nestled next to electric, impossible blues. Yellows so intense they hurt the eyes. Even through squinted, unbelieving lids, the air itself seemed to shimmer, to vibrate with these alien, invading hues. It was a spectacle, a final, terrible, unforgettable show. For an unwilling, captive audience, this was not a test. The whole world was suddenly bathed in this unholy, spectral light. The green fields outside the train turned a lurid, artificial purple. The familiar trees became stark black silhouettes against a chaotic backdrop of burning, shifting rainbows. The train carriage itself glowed eerily with reflected, constantly shifting colours, as if the entire train had been submerged in a liquid, radioactive dream, a nightmare from which there would be no waking. This was it, the end of everything in glorious, horrifying technicolor, a truly modern apocalypse. Inside the train for a moment, absolute silence, then screams. Not just simple screams of fear, but of raw disbelief, of minds cracking under the strain. People pointed, their hands trembling, jaws hung slack, eyes were wide, unblinking. Some instinctively shielded their children, others just stared, transfixed by the awful, undeniable majesty of it all. How could something so utterly destructive be so breathtakingly beautiful? The terrible paradox seared itself into their brains, a final, cruel, cosmic joke. This was not a drill. A low, guttural rumble began, growing steadily, shaking the earth beneath them, shaking the stationary train, shaking their very bones. It was the sound of the world tearing itself apart. It wasn't just one explosion, it was the terrible, drawn-out aftermath. The sky wept impossible colours. The ground groaned in pained response. Dust and debris, invisible from this distance, were surely rising elsewhere. But here only the light and the growing, suffocating terror. It was a symphony for the end of days, played in a major, terrible key. Fear was a cold iron hand, gripping every single heart, squeezing the breath from their lungs. But mixed with it, something else entirely, awe, a terrible, profound, undeniable awe, at the sheer, incomprehensible scale of it, at the vibrant, terrible power on display. This was an event, the one they'd always talked about, in hushed, fearful tones, in countless disaster movies, but never ever like this. Never so vividly beautiful, never so utterly, crushingly final. This was a full stop on humanity itself. The rainbow inferno continued to burn, a spectacular, festering wound in the sky, bleeding its vibrant colours over a dying, silent world. It was an insult, a beautiful, garish, vibrant insult. To everything that had ever been, to every normal, boring Tuesday, to every mundane, predictable train journey. This was how it all ended. Not with a quiet whimper, but with a silent, screaming, psychedelic bang, an apocalypse dressed in a clown's lurid suit. And we, the unwilling passengers, were in the front row watching it all.